On a dreary Wednesday morning, a soft drizzle tapped against the windows of the office building where Sarah, a quiet janitor, worked. Her life, as ordinary as any other day, had always been about simple routines. The faint sound of her cleaning supplies being shuffled about echoed through the empty halls. Her eyes lingered over the desk of the CEO, Michael Carter, who had just fired her the day before. The message was clear. There was no room for someone like her in a high-end firm. The firing was abrupt, no explanation, just a few cold words. Michael had given no reason for his decision, but Sarah knew the truth. She wasn't the kind of person who was noticed in places like that. She was just another invisible cog in the corporate machine. As she mopped the floor, her thoughts kept drifting back to how she was treated, dismissed, discarded, just another face in the crowd. But that morning, something incredible happened. The radio in the corner of the room crackled to life, a voice on the airwaves breaking through the monotony. And in breaking news, Sarah Larson, a janitor from the city, has just won the $10 million jackpot on the statewide lottery. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest as her cleaning rag slipped from her hands. The announcement was surreal. It couldn't be real, could it? The world outside seemed to pause for a moment as Sarah stood in shock. The lottery ticket she had bought on a whim, one she never thought would change her life, had indeed changed everything. Her breath caught in her throat as the weight of it all sank in. She was no longer just Sarah Larson, the invisible janitor. She was now a millionaire. A flood of emotions surged through her: disbelief, excitement, and a little bit of anger toward the man who had so casually discarded her. Michael Carter sat behind his polished mahogany desk, the city skyline stretching out behind him. His day had been filled with endless meetings, but something gnawed at him. The words he had spoken to Sarah yesterday, the way he had fired her without any real reason, kept circling his mind. The guilt was slowly consuming him. He had always prided himself on being a leader who cared for his employees. But firing Sarah was a decision he now regretted deeply. It wasn't just the fact that she had been loyal for years. It was the sudden realization that he had acted out of frustration. He had let his arrogance blind him to the truth. Sarah had always done her job well, perhaps better than most in the building. It was her quiet demeanor, her humility, that had made her easy to overlook. But now, with the news of her winning the lottery, Michael realized how wrong he had been. He tried to brush it off, but it was no use. He felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. His office, once a sanctuary of control and power, now felt suffocating. The idea of Sarah becoming wealthy, a woman he had fired with no second thought, did not sit well with him, but it was too late for regrets. Or was it? Suddenly his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw her name, Sarah Larson. His heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he answered the call, his voice betraying the nerves he couldn't hide. "Sarah?" Her voice came through the phone with a cool calmness. "Michael," she said, her tone steady, "I need to talk to you, in person." The coffee shop was crowded, but Sarah's presence seemed to carve out a space of its own. She sat at a small table by the window, her gaze directed toward the door as she waited for Michael to arrive. Her heart raced, a mix of anticipation and an odd sense of power that she had never felt before. The woman who had once been an invisible figure in the corporate world now had the upper hand. When Michael stepped through the door, his face was a mask of tension. He had called her earlier, asking for a meeting, and she had agreed, but neither of them knew what would come from it. He approached her table, a nervous smile attempting to break through the anxiety. "Sarah," he said, taking a seat across from her, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I want to apologize." Sarah met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "You fired me," she said simply, her voice devoid of anger, but laced with something he couldn't quite place. Just like that. No explanation, no reason. Michael's face flushed with embarrassment. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I was frustrated with some personal matters, and I took it out on you. I didn't realize how wrong it was." His words were genuine, but Sarah wasn't sure if she could forgive him so easily. Her eyes softened slightly. "I understand, but I don't know if I can forget it." A silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of what had happened. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Is there any way you could find it in your heart to forgive me? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I've made a huge mistake. Sarah paused, letting his words sink in. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about her. She had nothing to lose now, and everything had changed. Could she forgive him? Could she let go of the pain and anger? The answer was still unclear, but one thing was certain. Sarah had the power now. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of media attention, interviews, and celebrations. Sarah Larson, the janitor turned lottery winner, was everywhere. Her newfound wealth made her a celebrity overnight, and she was showered with gifts, opportunities, and offers she never thought possible. But amid all the excitement, there was one thing that weighed heavily on her mind: Michael's apology. Sarah knew she had every right to hold on to the grudge, to let the bitterness of being fired without cause rule her decisions. But as she walked through the city, the streets bustling with life, she realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about freeing herself from the past. But forgiveness didn't come easy. There were days when the anger flared up again, when memories of the cold dismissal rushed to the forefront of her mind. But she was determined to move forward, to live a life that was hers to shape. Michael's actions were a part of her story, but they didn't define her. And then one evening, as the city's lights twinkled in the distance, Sarah made her decision. She would meet with Michael once more, but this time, it would be different. She had nothing to prove, nothing to lose. This time, forgiveness would be on her terms. The air outside was crisp as Sarah made her way to the address she had agreed upon. The city lights reflected off the glass buildings, casting long shadows along the streets. Her hands trembled slightly in her pockets. She had made a decision, one that felt like a weight lifting from her chest, yet the heaviness of it still lingered. Her mind kept returning to the conversation with Michael. Could she really forgive him? After everything that had happened, he had fired her without a second thought, but that was before she won the lottery. Things had changed, and she had changed. The wealth was not just about money. It was about reclaiming her life, her power, her voice, and the thought of forgiving the man who had never thought twice about dismissing her felt like an impossibility. As she stood outside the restaurant, her eyes scanning the windows, Sarah was interrupted by the soft honk of a car horn. Michael had arrived. His car was parked in front of the restaurant, and he was standing outside waiting for her. He looked nervous, his posture stiff and unsure, an unusual sight for the once confident CEO. Sarah walked up to him, her footsteps confident despite the uncertainty swirling inside. "Michael," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Sarah, I can't thank you enough for coming." His words were rushed and his face was lined with exhaustion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. The things I said, the things I did, and You don't have to apologize again," Sarah interrupted, her voice surprisingly calm. She didn't want to hear more empty words. She needed actions now, not more regrets. "You've said what you needed to say, and I've thought about it a lot." Michael fell silent, his eyes searching hers, looking for some sign of the woman he once knew, the one who would have been content with a simple, "I'm sorry." But Sarah had changed, and so had the way she saw the world. "Forgiveness isn't just about letting you off the hook," Sarah continued, her gaze unwavering. "It's about letting go of the past and not letting it control me anymore. You can't fix everything you've done, but you can choose to be different moving forward, for yourself, for others." For a moment, Michael stood speechless, his expression one of disbelief. He had expected anger, bitterness, even hatred, but not this, not Sarah, the woman who had just shown him the greatest form of strength: forgiveness. In the weeks that followed their meeting, Michael found himself grappling with an unexpected shift. The apology, the acceptance, and the silence that followed haunted him in a way he had never anticipated. He had always been the one in control, the one making the decisions. But now Sarah's words echoed in his mind, challenging everything he had ever believed about leadership and success. Michael began to question himself, his values, and his approach to business. He had been so blinded by his own ambition, so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, that he had forgotten what it meant to truly lead with integrity. Sarah, the woman he had once discarded, had shown him the kind of strength he had never truly understood. He found himself looking at the employees around him with new eyes. He started to notice the small gestures of kindness, the quiet work that went unnoticed by most. He realized that Sarah, the janitor, had been one of the most loyal and hardworking employees in the building, and yet he had failed to see that. One morning, as Michael walked through the office, he caught sight of a janitor, someone he had never spoken to. He watched as they worked diligently, making the office space shine without asking for recognition. And in that moment, it all clicked. Sarah hadn't just been doing a job. She had been doing it with pride, with dedication, and he had failed to see that. It was a painful realization, but one that Michael knew he needed to face. He needed to do more than just apologize. He needed to show his employees that they mattered, that their work was valued no matter their role. Sarah's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. The $10 million lottery win had opened doors she never thought would be available to someone like her. She had moved into a new apartment, one with high ceilings, large windows, and a view of the city. She could afford to buy whatever she wanted and go wherever she pleased. But despite all the wealth and the attention, something inside her still yearned for something more. She had given herself the space to enjoy her new life, but the world around her felt strangely empty at times. The excitement of the media buzz, the endless interviews, and the offers from various companies to tell her story had all started to feel repetitive. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was the life that had been thrust upon her. Sarah realized that what she truly craved wasn't fame or fortune. It was for a purpose. She had spent so many years quietly cleaning other people's spaces that she longed to create something of her own. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She just wanted to build something that mattered. One afternoon, while sitting at a coffee shop, she overheard a conversation about a nonprofit organization that helped people find new job opportunities and break free from difficult circumstances. Her heart stirred as she listened to the stories of people who had fought their own battles. Sarah knew right then that this was the direction she needed to take. The idea of creating something that would help others, the same way she had been helped, felt right. She began to research nonprofit work, learning about the best ways to serve her community. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly at peace with the path she was carving for herself. Michael's journey toward redemption wasn't an easy one. He spent long hours working to reshape the company culture, to ensure that every employee, no matter their position, was valued and respected. He started holding monthly meetings with the janitors, maintenance workers, and other behind-the-scenes employees. He made a conscious effort to speak to them, to understand their struggles and successes. But as Michael worked to fix the broken pieces of his leadership, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. The guilt still lingered, and he knew that nothing would be truly right until he made things right with Sarah. One evening, after a particularly tough day at the office, Michael sat down and wrote a letter to Sarah. He poured his heart into it, expressing his deep regret and asking for one more chance to make amends. The letter wasn't just an apology. It was a plea for forgiveness, a desire to rebuild something broken. When Sarah received the letter, her heart softened once again. She had already forgiven him, but she could see that he was truly trying to make a change. He had learned from his mistakes. And while she didn't owe him anything, she knew that people could grow, that they could evolve. They met once again, this time in a quiet park. Michael handed her the letter, his eyes filled with a sincerity she hadn't seen before. "Sarah, I'm not asking for your forgiveness again," he said quietly. "I'm asking for the chance to prove that I've changed." Sarah smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You don't need to prove anything to me," she said, her voice steady. "Just keep showing up for those who need you, and that will be enough." And for the first time, Michael truly understood what it meant to lead with humility. As Sarah turned and walked away, the weight of the past was finally behind her. She had forgiven, not just Michael, but herself. And as the sun set on the horizon, she knew that a new chapter of her life was just beginning. One where she was no longer invisible, but a woman of purpose, of strength, and of endless possibilities. The days that followed the heartfelt meeting between Michael and Sarah seemed to shift the energy around them. Sarah had finally found peace, but Michael's journey was only beginning. He had spent years building his career on the premise that success was driven by power, control, and dominance. Now he was seeing the truth. Real success came from empathy, respect, and understanding. As he spent more time at the company, working side by side with the employees, Michael found that the transformations he had longed for weren't just happening in the boardroom. They were happening everywhere. His actions were inspiring those around him to rethink their roles and their worth. One afternoon, while walking through the halls, he caught a glimpse of an old colleague, Greg, who was a senior manager in the office. Greg had always been a hard-nosed leader, focused solely on results. He had once been Michael's right-hand man, but now the way he moved through the office felt different. He stopped Michael in his tracks, a hesitant smile spreading across his face. "I've been meaning to tell you," Greg began, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "Your approach, it's been making a difference. People are talking. They feel like they matter again. It's a good thing, Michael. I've been thinking a lot about the way I lead too." Michael nodded, understanding the weight of Greg's words. This wasn't just a company-wide transformation. It was becoming a cultural shift, one that could change the way the entire business world functioned. Meanwhile, Sarah was diving headfirst into her new journey with a renewed sense of purpose. She had already set up her nonprofit, which was aimed at helping individuals who had been overlooked or marginalized in society. With her newfound wealth, Sarah was determined to use her platform and resources to elevate others, to give them a chance at rebuilding their lives, just as she had done. The work wasn't easy, but Sarah was driven by a passion that had never burned so brightly before. She had witnessed firsthand how life could change in an instant, how an act of kindness could heal wounds, and how a single decision could alter the course of someone's life. It was this knowledge that kept her pushing forward, even when the road felt long. One evening, as Sarah sat in her office, the phone rang. She wasn't expecting any calls, especially not from someone in the corporate world. Her hands hesitated over the receiver before picking it up. The voice on the other end sent a chill down her spine. "Hello, Sarah. This is Michael Carter. I hope you're doing well," came his voice, steady but with an edge of uncertainty. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She hadn't heard from him in weeks, not since their last meeting in the park. Why was he calling now? "I have an offer for you," Michael continued. "I've been thinking a lot about how we can take this company to the next level, and I know what we've been doing so far is making a difference. But I want to take it further. I want to make a lasting impact, not just for the people working here, but for the communities around us." Sarah leaned back in her chair, intrigued but cautious. "What exactly are you asking?" "I want you to join me," Michael said, his tone serious. "Not just as a consultant, but as a partner. I want you to help me lead this company in a way that reflects the values you believe in. I know that I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to do the work. I want you to be the change we need." Sarah sat in silence for a long moment. She had spent so long imagining what it would be like to build something meaningful, to create a space where people were valued beyond their positions. And here was Michael, the man who had once discarded her, now offering her a chance to shape the very company that had once turned its back on her. "I appreciate the offer, Michael," Sarah said slowly, "but I think my heart belongs to something else now. The nonprofit I've started, it's where I'm meant to be. I want to help people, not just in a company, but in their lives. I want to create something that can make a real, lasting difference." Michael's voice faltered, disappointment creeping in. "I understand, but I had to ask." "You're on the right path, Michael," Sarah replied, her tone softening. "Just keep going, keep leading with integrity, and if you ever need help along the way, I'll be there. But my mission now is to give people who need it the most a second chance. That's where I feel I can truly make a difference." The call ended and Sarah sat there for a moment, reflecting on the path that had led her here. She had once been invisible in the corporate world, but now she was someone who had the power to choose her destiny. And that choice, as hard as it was to make, felt right. Michael sat alone in his office, staring at the glowing screen of his computer. Sarah's decision had stung, but deep down he knew it was the right choice for her. She had found her purpose, just as he was trying to find his. He thought back to their meeting and the conversations they had shared. Sarah had become the embodiment of everything he had once overlooked. humility, empathy, and the understanding that true leadership was about uplifting others, not stepping on them to climb higher. In the months that followed, Michael continued to push for the changes he had promised. He started offering mentorship programs for employees, encouraging them to share their thoughts and opinions. He created more avenues for community involvement, opening up new opportunities for his workers to give back to the areas that had supported them. He even used his position to advocate for fair wages and better working conditions, no longer turning a blind eye to the inequality that had once been so easy to ignore. The ripple effect was evident. Employees were more engaged, more motivated. They began to feel like they were part of something bigger, something meaningful. And Michael felt a sense of pride, not in the company's financial gains, but in the transformation that was taking place within the very people who worked there. He had done what he promised. He had turned the ship around, but the journey was far from over. There were still so many steps left to take, so many changes to be made. And Michael had learned that leadership was not a destination, but a continuous process. It was something that required constant self-reflection and growth. Months passed and Sarah's nonprofit grew, reaching more people than she could have ever imagined. She had created programs to provide mentorship, job training, and emotional support to individuals who had been overlooked by society. Her story had inspired countless others to believe that change was possible, no matter where they started. One day, as Sarah was overseeing a community event in one of the city's most underserved areas, she received a letter. It was from Michael. In it, he thanked her for the profound impact she had made on his life, for showing him what true leadership meant, and for pushing him to be a better man. He wrote that, although they were no longer working together, he carried the lessons she had taught him with him every day. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she read the letter. She had never expected anything in return for her forgiveness, let alone a heartfelt acknowledgement like this. But it warmed her heart, knowing that her actions, small as they may have seemed, had inspired a ripple of positive change. Sarah had forgiven Michael, but in doing so, she had sparked something bigger. She had shown him, and countless others, that it was never too late to change, to grow, and to make a difference. Her legacy was not just in the wealth she had earned, but in the lives she had touched, and the hope she had given to those who had none. As she stood there in the middle of the event, surrounded by the people she had helped, Sarah smiled. She had made the right choice. She had found her purpose. And this was only the beginning. Months turned into years and Sarah's nonprofit blossomed. What started as a small initiative to help a few had grown into a nationwide movement. Sarah had become a beacon of hope for the forgotten, the overlooked, and the underestimated. She had become a symbol of second chances, showing people that their worth wasn't determined by their circumstances. Sarah's work didn't just stop with the people she helped directly. Her story had sparked a wider conversation about empathy, about how people in power could make a difference by simply listening. Business leaders, government officials, and even other nonprofits began reaching out to Sarah, asking for her advice and guidance. And with each new partnership, Sarah's mission spread further, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. One evening, as Sarah sat at her desk, looking over the latest report from her nonprofit, she received an email. It was from a university offering her an honorary doctorate in recognition of her efforts in social justice and community work. At first, Sarah laughed at the idea. She had never imagined herself as someone deserving of such recognition. But as she thought about it, she realized that the journey she had taken, the journey from invisible janitor to national advocate, was something she had never expected. It wasn't just about the recognition, it was about the impact she had made along the way. With this newfound recognition came new challenges. As the organization grew, so did the responsibilities. Sarah had to balance her time between public speaking, managing the nonprofit, and supporting the individuals who looked up to her. But she did it with grace and never forgetting the roots of her journey. Back at the company, Michael Carter's transformation continued. He was now a different leader, one who valued humility over ego and understood that his position was not a privilege, but a responsibility. He had taken the lessons Sarah had taught him to heart, and his leadership was being felt across the entire company. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and the company's reputation as a place that truly cared for its workers was growing. One afternoon, as Michael stood in front of a large audience at a business conference, he found himself thinking back to the woman who had changed his life, Sarah. He knew that without her, he would never have understood the true essence of leadership. He had once fired her without a second thought, and now, years later, he was speaking at a conference on diversity, leadership, and corporate responsibility, topics he never would have even considered before. Leadership, Michael spoke to the crowd, his voice strong but humble, is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. I learned this the hard way. I once fired a woman, a janitor, without understanding her worth. Today, I am proud to say that this company has grown in ways I never thought possible, because we've learned to value every person, no matter their role. As he spoke, Michael's mind drifted back to the countless conversations he'd had with employees, the ones who had confided in him, shared their struggles, and shown him the true meaning of resilience. He had become a better leader, not because of his success, but because of his ability to listen, to learn, and to grow from his mistakes. His commitment to change wasn't just about transforming his company, it was about transforming himself, and in doing so, creating a space where others could thrive. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood on the balcony of her office, gazing out at the city. The skyline had changed over the years, but the view remained the same, steady, enduring, just like her journey. She had made it, but she never forgot where she came from. The quiet janitor who had once mopped the floors in a cold corporate building, wondering if anyone would ever notice her. And now, as she watched the world unfold before her, Sarah realized that the true beauty of her success wasn't in the money or the recognition. It was in the change she had sparked. Every life she touched, every person who found hope through her nonprofit, was proof of that. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. He had invited her to speak at a gala he was hosting for a charitable cause. Sarah smiled as she read the message. It wasn't just about the invitation, it was about how far they had both come. From the tension of their past to the growth they had both experienced, it felt like a full circle moment. Michael had found his own path to redemption, and Sarah had paved the way for others to follow. It wasn't about a CEO begging for forgiveness anymore. It wasn't even about a janitor winning the lottery. It was about two people, one who had fallen from grace and another who had risen above her circumstances, coming together to create a world where everyone had a chance. As Sarah stepped out into the cool morning air, she took a deep breath. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer invisible. She had found her purpose, and in doing so, she had helped others find theirs. This was her legacy, not the millions she had won, but the lives she had touched, the hearts she had healed, and the world she had helped to shape. The road ahead was bright, filled with endless possibilities. And Sarah Larson, once a forgotten janitor, was now the architect of her own destiny, leaving behind a legacy that would echo for generations to come.